Well, welcome back, everybody. Today, I want to talk to you about something that came to mind recently that if you're not reaching your goals, it's your own dang fault. And I think you know that. I think everybody knows that. But I wanted to create this space to discuss today because a lot of times people want things and then create this cognitive dissonance where they're not reaching what they think they should be reaching based on their inputs. But the reality is that people haven't determined what their non negotiables are, and their identity doesn't create the habits that would create the outcomes. And I'll give you an example before we even dive into the topic that I was talking to my wife recently about this. And I was like, I like having a clean house. So I've decided that I'm the kind of person that will not leave trash out. Now, it helps, of course, if you tell your wife this, because then she will also say, hey, you said you weren't going to leave trash out. And then you're like, oh, shoot. Yeah, that's right. So it kind of creates this internal feedback loop of where you're always checking in on yourself to avoid being reprimanded. But it's helpful because if I know that I am the kind of person that doesn't leave trash out, my default when I leave trash out is this discomfort where I'm like, oh, right, I'm supposed to do that, and creating these non-negotiables within our identity, within our life, these absolute truths, so to speak, that push us towards our goals, or at the very least keep us accountable to stay in line with our goals. Now, as someone who also lives with type 1 diabetes, one of my non-negotiables, as I'm sure you figured out, would be to take insulin, because without insulin, I don't survive. And so that's by default one of those non negotiables for life. You already have non negotiables. You eat food, you drink water, you sleep. Probably not enough, but you do. And so the idea is to create these non negotiables in our life that create forward progress and momentum, that make our goals inevitable. When I was training for Ironman, there were non negotiables of how many workouts per week, what those workouts looked like, right, to make success inevitable. And within each area of your life, you'll have these non negotiables pop up as well to ensure greater success. So within, like, I coach type 1 diabetics within my company. And one of our non negotiables is you pre bolus. It's a term we use. It's when you take your insulin before you eat your food, because insulin takes 10 to 15 minutes to even start working. And if you do just that one thing, your controlled blood sugars, it's like it's the easiest thing you can do for one of the biggest outcomes. And so looking for those cheat codes, those hacks in life where if you just do this little thing and make it a non-negotiable, you will experience better outcomes by default. So I wanted to introduce this topic because there's likely areas in your life that you're shooting yourself in the foot, so to speak, but there's also likely other areas in your life where you could easily get another 20, 30, 50% outcomes without even lifting a finger. You just make it part of your identity and it becomes part of your default, your routine. Yeah, I wanted to explore this topic with you today in hopes that it brings value to you and to learn from some of my own experiences, but also my own pitfalls. So, wanted to open the discussion as well. We've got Stephen here who might have some thoughts for us as well today.
Hey Matt, can you explain some non-negotiables that people can have in their everyday life?
I think some of the easiest non-negotiables are the things that we overlook in our routines. Um, you think about your goals. I want to become more fit. Well, a non-negotiable should be to go to the gym, to eat healthy, right? But getting more specific within those nuanced structures of what do you do at the gym? How many times do you do it? What is the greatest leveraged activity that I can do? So there's layers to this, as with anything in life, where we have kind of the top layer of doing the things that yield results. But the layer beneath that is doing leverage things that make the results more inevitable, but also easier to accomplish. And finding those leveraged activities often requires expertise, right? Either of yourself or of a coach or a mentor that you have. So when I look at type 1 diabetes as an example, most people think, oh, you just take your insulin, right? And yes, that is one of the activities that has to be a non negotiable. But for leveraged activities, I look like the timing of the insulin. I look at things to improve insulin sensitivity, like exercise, getting better sleep, having a healthy diet, right? These different aspects that I would say add fuel to the progress in my life.
What does no negotiation actually look like in practice? Like when you're going through the steps, what does this look like?
See, this I believe this builds on discipline, but if we're being completely transparent, I think it also can be mistaken for rigidity. And my wife has challenged me on this at times as well, where I get on her case for not cleaning things up. And number one, that's not her responsibility because it's not her non negotiable. It's mine, right? But I'm letting it float into my relationship with her when I speak of keeping the house tidy. But two is that when we look at non negotiables as a way to structure things intelligently and intentionally, it can become a trap for ourselves to get legalistic with our goals, to not have wiggle room. And I think that that's where we can get into this space of overwhelm or overproduction or an obsession with productivity where things have to have a reason. And honestly, this is something that I'm still working through. It's a tough line to toe because on one hand, you want to reach your goals, right? You want to be disciplined, you want to be productive. But on the other hand, if all you do is be productive, you miss out on life. I've got a daughter that I want to spend more time with. I have a wife that I want to go on more date nights with. I actually want to have fun myself. Crazy thought. And so the more I focus on non negotiables, the easier it gets to make excuses that non negotiables should supersede the rest of life when that might not inherently be true. Right. So, an example, a little bit silly an example, but an example nonetheless, is that if my daughter makes a mess, she's 4 years old, am I going to get frustrated at her for being a kid? No. Right. And if I leave a piece of trash on the counter because uh, the sink is overflowing. Am I in trouble with myself for not picking up the piece of trash that I made my non-negotiable? No. It's so I think that it's a challenging discussion because a non-negotiable by definition is not negotiable. It must happen, right? And that's how you create inevitable success. If you create rules that you are rigid to, and I will say that when I am rigid with my rules, outcomes exist as a default, right? It will yield progress, but I've missed the bigger picture in these nuances. So I'm already almost backpedaling, looking at this idea of non negotiables and creating absolute truths in life. Because the more often we lean on absolute truths, it's because we have less certainty in other areas of our life. It's because we want to create certainty. And as somebody who is a self proclaimed type A control freak, I've certainly noticed this pattern in my own life where I want to create non negotiables so that I can get as close to a guaranteed outcome as possible and give myself this illusion that I can control my outcomes in life. So, truthfully, I don't think you can have guaranteed outcomes. And I don't think that non negotiables will always yield the same result. But if you're looking for initial momentum, if you're looking for progress, if you're looking to build habits, I think that's where non negotiables have the greatest benefit.
For absolute truth, how do you enforce it when it's inconvenient in your everyday life?
Think it's important as we look at absolute truths, as we look at the goals that we create to find balance. And this is a word that I've struggled to find the perfect meaning for because the truth is there is no true balance. There is no such thing as work life balance if you want to achieve great things, which I do. There is no such thing as a fair life. I mean, life is just not fair by default. Why did I get type 1 diabetes when I've been healthy my whole life? I was diagnosed as a collegiate athlete, right? Like, it doesn't make sense. But when we look at absolute truths and kind of creating absolute truths for our own lives, I think part of it is our attempt at creating guardrails in our progress so that we can contain the chaos and keep things on track to the best of our abilities in order to reach the goals that we want. But I mean, as a Christian, I also believe that God's got His own plans for us, and He kind of chuckles when He looks at us trying to control the outcomes and ensure that everything fits perfectly into our plan because we know better, And when you really think about it, nobody knows better. Everybody's trying to do their best with the information that they have, but information changes, situations change. So to say that there are absolute truths is in itself kind of a farce. But looking at creating absolute truths as a way to increase the likelihood of outcomes, I think that that's helpful in terms of absolute truths that we operate by. So things like identity statements. I am the kind of person that cleans up my messes. I am the kind of person that takes my insulin before I eat my food. I am the kind of person that doesn't skip leg day, right? Those statements themselves, the I am statements, the identity pieces, Those are absolute truths that I believe that if created intentionally, that you can create an unstoppable machine of progress, but you have to be careful with it because these absolute truths that you create become so deep rooted in identity that they can take away from logic. Where, I mean, transparently, my absolute truth was that I was going to become an Ironman. Nothing was going to stop me. Not injury, not blood sugars, not business, not family, right? And not that they were going to stop me, but I let Ironman become a goal that took over my life, where I sacrificed hangouts with family. I sacrificed, family dinners. I wouldn't be home for a full day because sometimes the workouts were 10 or 11 hours. I'd leave before sunrise and I'd get home just in time to say goodnight. And you have to be cautious when creating these absolute truths because they can be powerful. And that's kind of the point of this video is that your absolute truths that you create, your non-negotiables, so to speak, they can make or break your destiny, your future, right? So used intentionally and with caution, they can create an amazing future, right? They can guide you towards the best version of yourself. But outside of that, or you done recklessly, if you just decide, I'm the kind of person who eats 30 fruits and vegetables a day, and you're not used to eating that, well, you're going to have a hard time with your gut because you're not used to consuming that much fiber, right? So I think that there has to be this filter that we see absolute truths through, almost as if we have a decision matrix that we think of them through. So if, then, unless. So within the realm of absolute truths, if there is trash on the counter, then I clean it up unless there's something more critical at play. If it's Sunday, then I go for my Ironman workout unless it's somebody's birthday. I should probably go to my family's birthday, right? So as long as we have this filter through which we see our absolute truths or create them, these non-negotiables, uh, again, I'm going to keep defaulting back to type 1 diabetes. It's very relevant for me, but I take my insulin before the meal unless there's an emergency. Of course, right? The house is on fire. Okay, probably not going to prioritize taking my insulin on time if I got to put a fire out. So being able to recognize those, I think that is maturity. The understanding that when the situation changes, so much the strategy. With context, we can make better decisions. So, should we develop non negotiables? Should we develop absolute truths? Yes, I think they can be extremely helpful for creating progress, creating momentum towards our goals, and making our goals very close to inevitable at the very least. But I think it's also helpful to think critically about these things. And without that critical thought, you can become so rigid, so legalistic that you miss out on the bigger picture. It's somebody who makes it their entire goal to make $1 million that they miss the opportunity to make $100 million. Somebody whose entire goal is to raise a family that they missed out on the family they already had. Like there's so many things in life that if we hyper focus on the wrong area, then we miss out on the memories, the moments. And I think this opens the discussion up into a bigger picture of attention and focus. I've heard it said before that time is everything, right? And you can't get back time that you've spent. It's your most valuable resource. But the reality is that your attention is far more valuable. Where you put your attention is where your energy goes. And so you can give someone your time, but if you're with them and thinking of something else, they get nothing from you. So think truly about where the attention that you have is going. And if that attention is put to work, it can accomplish great things. But getting lost in an obsession, getting lost in hyper focus can also be equally as dangerous.
If people watching the video could enforce one absolute truth starting tomorrow, what should they think of starting?
That's a good question. If somebody could guarantee an outcome, I would want them to think about what is the greatest good that this could do in my life? What is the farthest reaching impact? In other words, what is the highest leverage goal that I can accomplish? Which one thing, what's the big domino, so to speak, that I can push over that will make everything else better? It doesn't have to fix everything, But what's the one highest leverage activity or identity piece or belief about myself or action that I can take on a consistent basis that would yield the biggest ripple effect, right? So I'll give you one example in my own life. I know that if I were to focus on one non negotiable that would have the greatest impact, it would be to get better sleep. I'm not sleeping enough. I'm not prioritizing sleep quantity or quality. And if I were to focus on that one thing, the absolute truth that I will be in bed for a minimum of 8 hours, that would be my absolute truth. Non negotiable would be setting up a bedtime routine that ensures that I get to bed on time and in a restful state. Everything else in life would improve. My blood sugars would improve, my relationships, my energy, my business, my fitness, my recovery, my injuries, my mental health, everything else would improve. Now, for most people, this is true, right? Most people are not prioritizing sleep in the way they should be. But there are areas in your life that only you can identify that you know are a weak point for you. So if there was one starting place, it would be, where is the biggest pull in your life? What is holding you down? What is getting in the way? What is causing a negative ripple effect? And how can I reverse that polarity? How can I turn that into a non negotiable to fix it? How can I make forward progress in that moment through the creation of an absolute truth, of a non negotiable, of something that will create a ripple effect so powerful that everything else in life by default sees a benefit?
What would future you thank present you for not compromising on?
Future me would really want me to spend time enjoying the present, my body, my relationships, my abilities, my cognitive function. I've had the unique experience to see others around me decline in many areas of life, decline in relationships, decline in cognitive function and physical ability, in their business, in their financial situations. I've seen people lose their marriages. I've seen people lose their kids. And as a result, it has reinforced this idea that nothing is guaranteed, that we truly take many, many things in life for granted, and that if we could take a moment to be present and enjoy the now, I believe that future us would be far more grateful for that because we've been present the entire time. I think most of us get lost in either the past or the future, right? Where we think about things that we regret doing or wish we could change. And we also get concerned about how the future might shape out. And this is us concerning ourselves with finances, with relationships, with health. I mean, I've seen people think themselves into sickness, too concerned about how sick they might get in the future that they get drained of their energy in the present. And it's sad to watch this. And so if there was something that my older self wished my younger self knew, I believe it would be presence in the now.
At what point does a non-negotiable stop being a rule and become an identity?
When you no longer have to think about a non negotiable, but you notice its ripple effect, I believe that's when it's taken root, when it's become a default in your routines. For me, and this is, it's an interesting thought, really, because I have a slight sense of guilt when I don't do things that are in alignment with what I believe to be true about myself. If I skip a workout for more than a couple days, I feel it in my soul. Something is wrong. I am not in alignment with who I am meant to be. If I don't pick up trash, I keep circling back to this one. It's silly, but I used to be messy. So I created a rule for myself, a non negotiable, that I do not leave things undone. Another rule I'll give to you that has been very effective for me is that I do not leave things unfinished. So I also have actual diagnosed ADHD. So for me, lots of things got left unfinished all the time since I was a kid. I was diagnosed at age 6. So you can imagine my entire life, all the unfinished projects and special interests that I've developed and dropped. So, one other rule for myself, the non negotiable, is that I complete tasks, right? Which is, it's challenging. It really is, because then before the end of a single day, I've got 15 new tasks that I have to complete. And my wife wonders why I'm still doing these tasks at 10 o'clock at night. But that's my deal. My weakness is that my brain wants to split and do 10 different things all at once. So I do the 10 different things to completion. And so While it's been challenging, it's also been rewarding in the sense that I get to cross things off. I don't have 50 different items on my brain every night, making it difficult to sleep. I can go to sleep peacefully because I know I've checked it off. And if I haven't checked it off, I have a plan for the next day on how I can check it off. So I would say that's been very beneficial for me as well.
What non-negotiable are you still working up the courage to like live out?
Hmm. If I were being completely honest with myself, a non negotiable that I am still working up the courage to live out would be a deep dive into my own health. And I've been pretty healthy. I eat healthy. I exercise. I drink my water. I do all the stuff you're supposed to do. But I've got some stuff going on internally, something with my gut. I'm finally exploring some things with my feet. Just overtraining with Ironman and ultra marathon distances. And I went too hard too fast and developed some injuries and some sicknesses, I would say. There's something off inside, and I've been pushing it off in the pursuit of other things. In the beginning of this video, I talked about how balance is kind of a joke. You're never fully balanced. You're always pursuing one thing more than the other. And that's how growth works. You have to have an unbalanced approach to one thing to experience large growth in that area. Then you shift focus again and grow in a different area. You will never grow equally in all directions. Best you can do at that point is maintain. You're holding everything together, but it's taking all of your attention. You're very busy. So when you split your attention and go all in, you see massive growth. I've seen this with my Ironman journey, with my business, taking it to 7 figures plus, with my family life, and with my health. Of course, this is kind of the next frontier for me, is acknowledging that my body needs to have some focus. I've been ignoring doctor's appointments for far too long. And if I need to be vulnerable with myself, it's that my health has taken a back seat in pursuit of greater things. But then recognizing, of course, as I've mentioned in a different video, maybe we'll post it at the end of this one, that if you have great goals, you have to have physical health. You have to have the ability to reach those great goals, right? So if your physical health is not taken care of, you will not have the ability to pursue greatness. And then beneath your physical health is your mental health. If you're not taking care of your mental health, you will not have the capacity, you will not have the motivation, the willpower to do the things you need to do with your physical health to get the outcomes that you want with your massive goals. So I know it's a critical cog in the machine of life that I need to take care of my health and develop more non-negotiables around, and have been for the last week and a half. I finally pulled the trigger. I will say though, my wife made the first appointment, so she gets full credit for getting me back on the right track with my health.
How do non-negotiables create clarity instead of limitation?
With a non negotiable, you can make something black or white. You are either making progress or you're falling behind. A great story. I was a rower in college. So I mentioned I was a collegiate athlete. I went to San Diego State University and I was a collegiate rower. And there's a movie that came out about rowers where these two gentlemen who were in a pair. So two people in one boat. I was in an 8-man boat. But in this pair, they were obsessed with reaching success. And every decision that they made impacted their ability or likelihood of reaching that success. And so the quote from the book is, does it make the boat go faster? And that was the only question they would ask. Anytime that either of them had a decision to make, hey, you want to go out tonight and party? Does it make the boat faster? No. Okay, then no. And it's this amazing filter of absolute truth. It's black and white. Does it make the boat go faster? Yes, do it. Does it make the boat go faster? No, don't do it. Right. And these non negotiables, these absolute truths give us this filter through which we can see our decisions in life affecting our outcomes. So when we create these non negotiables, these absolute truths, it gives us an ability to make decisions for us. It reduces what's called decision fatigue, and it makes life itself much simpler. Instead of thinking about, I don't know what to do, there's overwhelm, there's so many options. Does it make the boat go faster? Yes or no? Does this make it more or less likely for me to lose the fat that I've been trying to lose? Yes or no? Does it make it more or less likely that I'm more present as a dad? Yes or no? Right? Whatever your goal is, whatever your North Star is, frame it as a question. Does it make it more or less likely that I reach that goal? create a non-negotiable around that, an absolute truth, and then all of a sudden it's black or white. You have your answer to everything in life. It can be that simple, but most people hide from that because it gives them the answer that they didn't want to hear in the first place, which is accountability.
If your life had 3 non-negotiables, what would they be?
Ooh. If I had to frame three non-negotiables for my current lifestyle and reaching goals in each area, I would say that number one is sleep. And these are non-negotiables crafted for my weaknesses, right? So everybody watching and engaging this is it's going to be a little bit different for you. But for me, I know sleep has the greatest ripple effect on my physical and mental health. So number one non-negotiable, quality and quantity of sleep, a sleep routine to get me in a good place for sleeping between 7 and 9 hours of optimal sleep. So that's number one. Number two non negotiable, I would say, and this is one that I am not currently doing a great job at, but for full transparency, and I believe this is also serves as accountability for myself, is a weekly date night with my wife. The person you marry determines the outcomes, or not the outcomes, but the trajectory of your life, right? It's the single greatest decision you make in your entire life because you are, for better or for worse, connected to that person for the rest of your life. So, uh, and for people watching this too, whether you like it or not, you made the choice. So figure it out. I don't believe that divorce is an option. There's really only a few reasons why. And I'm not going to get into that because I'm not a relationship expert, but my wife and I are committed to each other forever, right? So because of that, I need to take care of that relationship. And if we're doing great, it's going to have a great effect on the rest of my life. If we're not doing great, that's a constant source of stress, right? Because we live together. There's no getting away from that. So, non negotiable number two, a weekly date night. And like I said, this is accountability for me. I have let other things get in the way of that periodically, like work or like fitness or like um, other ventures of mine. So, that is non negotiable number two. Now, non negotiable number three, I would say it falls under the category of faith and mental health. These are two important areas to me. I've seen the depths of mental health with a lot of different diagnoses over the years of PTSD, suicidal ideation, panic disorder, anxiety, and all sorts of stuff for a number of reasons. But recognizing that, yes, mental health is important and needs to be focused on. But for me personally, focusing on God reframes the perspective that I have within my mental health. So, expressing gratitude to my creator, right? Understanding that God has a greater purpose for me, understanding that God loves me. It it lays the foundation for a much stronger start to my mental health journey. So my next and final non-negotiable is to focus on God, to focus on faith. And I've seen that take me much further when I'm down in the dumps having a hard time, when I'm doing great, focusing on God always improves the outcomes.
What kind of person do non-negotiables force people to become?
Non-negotiables give us a filter through which we see ourselves, and it strips away the excuses. A non-negotiable, as I've mentioned, is black and white, right? So if you do the things you said you were going to do, you build confidence, you build certainty, and you build progress. If you don't do the things you said you were going to do, you strip confidence. You have to own up to the fact that you lied to yourself and that you're letting yourself down. So for me, non negotiables and staying consistent with them allow me to build up confidence in myself and in my abilities to do hard things, right? And this is a phrase that we've been teaching my daughter where she leans into doing hard things. So much so that at my last Ironman race, I told her the night before the race, it's like, and I was kind of joking, but kind of not. It's like, I'm kind of nervous. I don't know if I want to do this race. What do you think I should do? Actually hoping that she would say, like, let's go to the beach or like, anything else other than doing the Ironman race. And she was like, Daddy, we do hard things. I was like, dang it. You're so good at this. And I think that's what non negotiables give us the chance to do is to see what greatness feels like, to fulfill our greatest potential. Because when you stick to your non negotiables, which are intentionally made to be leveraged activities that are done consistently, that's the formula for success is doing the right stuff for a long enough amount of time to yield progress, to give you the result. So, what does it do for us? It gives us the ability to experience momentum, to find progress, and ultimately to achieve success, but also to stop lying to ourselves if it's something that isn't important to us. So, a non negotiable that I tried to make happen was 7 to 9 servings of fruits and vegetables every single day. I failed that one miserably. Turns out that wasn't super important to me at that time. I'm going to revisit that soon because now I'm revisiting physical health as a focus. But my goodness, that exposed my priorities pretty quickly.
When does flexibility turn into avoidance of your non-negotiables?
See, I think this is a helpful filter for our loved ones to see through with us because they're going to ask us to bend when it doesn't fit their will. Uh, Not that they shouldn't, but if you're if you're not going to be flexible, it can be a sign of discipline. But I would also argue that discipline itself can be a mask. And I've discussed this in previous videos, but discipline for me was the easy answer out because it looks good. And so being flexible in those cases was the hard thing, where I didn't want to be flexible because it required that I change the plan, which means that I was no longer certain in the outcome. So I think that flexibility being an option with context can be powerful. Again, back to that if then statement, if then unless. If this is happening, then I do that unless this other situation is present or unless this context changes. So when the situation changes, so much our strategy. But I think that the clarity that we're looking for is if the North Star changes. So if the outcome that we're seeking changes, flexibility should be entertained, right? But if the goal is the same and there is no new situation, then we're bending the rules to fit our own current desires. So a better way of saying that is if I want to lose 30 pounds and I don't want to go to the gym today, I can find a way to make an excuse that says, I went yesterday. But if I go into my goals and say, actually, I want to lose 20 pounds, I'm lowering my standards. Well, then it might make sense to skip the gym today if you're okay with the end goal changing, right? So looking at flexibility as a tool can be helpful, but in terms of avoidance, I think that that filter is only going to be self-defined. Only you will know if where you bend is for your benefit or to your detriment.
What's an absolute truth that you want to represent your name and how people see you as a person?
An absolute truth that I stand for is avoiding complacency. I fight complacency. It is disgusting to me. And I say that as someone who used to be complacent. And I say it because I've seen the damage that it can do. So the absolute truth to me is that you should never settle. The moment you become complacent is the moment you start falling behind. And this word stands out to me because as a diabetic, the first thing our doctors tell us is if you become complacent, you get complications or a non compliant diabetic, right? And complacency kills, which is true. If I don't take my insulin, I will die. But I think in the bigger picture, complacency leads to regret. And people like to blame outside. I heard this great distinction that was drawn where if you want to grow, you blame yourself. If you want to feel comfortable, you blame others. So looking at yourself as the reason for growth or failure is where that filter is drawn, right? And complacency is the thing that I stand against because as long as we're against complacency, we will never stop moving. And it doesn't mean you can't be excited. Doesn't mean you can't reach a finish line, but recognize that when you reach a finish line, you stop growing. And in many cases in life, when you stop growing, you do begin to lose what you've gained. I became an Ironman, then I got injured and stopped training. And now, I'll be super honest, as somebody who raced 140.6 miles in a single day, the world's hardest single day ultra endurance activity, I can no longer run a 5K, which is 3.2 miles, because my feet are injured, but also because I stopped training, right? I have the title, I reached it. Great. Now what? Now I can't do that because I stopped. So I reached the finish line and I've fallen, right? There is no I made it and hold. It's I made it and I kept going, or I made it and I fell behind. That's it. So complacency, and in this case, the Ironman thing, it's not rooted in complacency. I was actually depressed, like clinically depressed when I got injured because I had so much of my identity rooted in the Ironman and the ultra endurance activities. That's a discussion for another day. But when you look at your fall from greatness rooted in complacency, I believe that's where a lot of depression can set in because you realize that you are the one at fault and you regret your actions. Don't let that become a reality. Avoid complacency.
How do hard lines actually create freedom in the future?
Hmm. A phrase that's come to mind often is hard now, easy later. Easy now, hard later. Meaning, if you do the hard things now, work out, eat healthy, sleep right, you will feel well into your old age. If you party now, avoid healthy foods, eat junk food, don't work out, you're going to die weak, sick, diseased, and probably early, right? So the hard lines that we set now enable us to have better structure, yes, better goals and higher standards that we get to reach, yes, but also enable us to have these things built into who we are that it's automated so much of our success that it reduces the energy that's required to reach greater heights, right? So when I was doing an Ironman, I'm just going to keep falling back to this example because it's so recent in my head. I could just go out and run a half marathon just for fun. Like that was an easy day for me. Now, obviously, I can't, not at that place anymore. But when you reach for greatness and you set these non-negotiables, these absolute truths and these routines in place, these hard lines, as you said, it makes everything else easier by default. It's like when you think about brushing your teeth, right? Do you have to think about brushing your teeth? No, you just do it because it's in your routine. It's a non negotiable. I probably should have led with this example in the beginning. It's way easier to explain. When you build things into your routine that you know you need to do anyways, they become so ingrained in your head and in your routine and your schedule that they don't require effort. You just do it, right? When I take my insulin, I just do it. But at first, it was tough. So you establish those hard lines, those non-negotiables, in order to embed these routines in your life that will benefit future you. When you first started brushing teeth, I'm teaching my daughter how to brush her own teeth right now. She's not the best at it. All right. It takes effort. She has to focus. Don't forget that tooth. Okay. Oh, that one over there. In a couple of years, it's just going to be a no brainer, right? She's going to have the ability to brush her teeth, floss her teeth, get ready for bed, shower. She won't need our help. So we set the hard lines now so that future us gets to have those things as default.
What truth do you want your standards to leave behind?
I want people to know that you don't have to settle for whatever the status quo is. As a type 1 diabetic, I was told at age 19 when I was diagnosed that I would be dead by age 30. I was told that the road leading to my death at age 30 would be filled with complications and sorrow and pain, and then I'd never be able to eat anything fun ever again because I refused to accept that as truth. And I wanted to set my own truths. I found not only could I live longer, I'm 35 now, but I could also live a full life. I could raise a family. I could become an Ironman. I could build a business and I could still eat pancakes. I could still have all sorts of fun and be the healthiest version of myself by the metrics of my blood labs than I've ever been. I'm healthier now as a diabetic than I was before getting type 1 diabetes. So, the truth that I want people to understand is that you don't have to accept anything. This whole idea of outcomes being predetermined, I think it's false. That if you get sick, you stay sick. You can fight it. And it doesn't mean that you will see positive income outcomes. You won't see positive effects by default, but you can fight for it. You can do something about it. And that, to me, is worth pursuing. Because what if? What if it gets better? What if the effort that you put in actually works? How good does this get? And I think that's the frame that I choose to hold because you could easily go the other way. What if I die? What if I don't make it past 30? True. That's possible. But as I said earlier, where attention goes, energy flows, right? So if my attention is on the negative, if my attention is on how bad can it get, my brain will find reasons to make that happen. But if I'm focused on the good, I'm focused on how good things can get, what are the best possible outcomes? How lucky could I get? You start finding things that weren't easily perceived before. New options, thinking outside the box, actually thriving instead. It's amazing when you look at life through that filter.
All right, Matt, is there anything else you want to add to the topic maybe before we wrap up here?
Yeah. Best thing I can leave people with is this: stop making excuses. I think that we hold the keys to our future, but we also hold the keys to our demise. Like you get to decide what it is you do in life. And the craziest thing, I'll end with this too. The craziest thing that I came across a number of years ago from one of my mentors is that you are one decision away from a wildly different outcome. Like at any point, you could just decide you're going to focus on one thing and become an expert in that one thing. As an example, one day I decided on a whim, spontaneously, mind you, I was going to become an Ironman. And in a very spontaneous, honestly impulsive moment, I clicked submit, I bought my ticket, and then I freaked out because I was like, shoot, what did I just do? I made a decision that dramatically altered the direction of my life. At any point, you can stop smoking. You can stop being fat. You can stop being lazy. Again, coming from somebody who's been in a lot of those places, I used to sit on the couch and watch Netflix all day and play video games all night. That was me. Not a drive, wasn't determined. I didn't care. I had no idea of what the future held. I was complacent, and it sickens me. So you think about this at any moment, like right now, you could decide that you are going to focus on one thing and become great. You have that capacity at any given moment to change the outcome of your life. So if there's one thing that future you would ask you to do, I believe that's it. Make a decision, create your absolute truth, and avoid complacency. And you guys, if you appreciate this content, stick around. I love having you here. Love being surrounded by like-minded individuals who pursue greatness, yes, but also seek the idea of balance. And we said it was impossible to find true balance, but it doesn't mean you can't push for it. Doesn't mean you can't seek the best of all areas in life in a constant pursuit of that balance. So thanks for hanging out. Appreciate having you here. We'll see you guys in the next one.